Good evening, dear listeners, and a very warm welcome to you all. Wherever you are tuning in from tonight, maybe cozied up in bed, listening from your favourite quiet corner at home, or perhaps relaxing somewhere peaceful. With the world fading away outside, I'm so glad you've joined me here. Take a slow, deep breath. Let your shoulders drop. Maybe pull the covers up a bit higher and feel the day gently slip away. Let the story begin. The Carpathian Palace in Bucharest was the perfect stage for tragedy. Elegant, refined, every guest playing their role amid crystal chandeliers and velvet drapes. Then Prince Alexandru Mavrocordat, heir to an ancient Boyar fortune and rumoured royal advisor, was found dead in the Moorish salon. Cyanide in his sweet liqueur. His body slumped beside the marble fountain. Police saw a simple suicide, for despair over mounting debts. But Hercule Poirot saw a performance. Someone in this theatre of wealth and intrigue was playing the role of innocent, the role of murderer. The curtain rises. Chapter 1. The stage is set. Carpathian Palace rose like a theatrical backdrop against the October night of 1937. Its Brankovenesque arches and Art Deco windows glowed softly. Inside, the air was thick with Worth perfume, Cuban cigar smoke, and the sweet breath of hothouse lilies, arranged in tall crystal vases. Prince Alexandru Mavrocordat had invited Bucharest society for a weekend of cultured conversation and discreet negotiation. The grand drawing room hummed with life. Silk evening gowns rustled. Champagne corks popped with delicate snaps. Distant piano notes drifted like smoke. Polished mahogany reflected the flicker of firelight. Velvet curtains absorbed every whisper. Then silence fell like a dropped curtain. A footman carrying a tray of strong continental coffee entered the Moorish salon. He froze. Prince Alexandru lay beside the marble fountain, one hand still curled around a crystal glass. The rim bore the faint bitter almond stain of cyanide. His silk dressing gown was immaculate. No struggle, no overturned furniture. Only the soft trickle of the fountain and the grandfather clock's measured chime broke the stillness. The police arrived within the hour. Their heavy boots thudded across parquet floors. After a brief examination, they pronounced suicide. Debts had mounted. Investments had collapsed. Despair, they said, had driven the prince to end his performance abruptly. Yet the guests who gathered in the warm drawing room did not accept the verdict so easily, and they formed small knots beneath the tinkling crystal chandelier. Leather armchairs creaked as they sat. Cold marble mantelpieces contrasted the fire's heat. Rain began tapping the tall windows like impatient fingers. Hercule Poirot reached the palace the following morning. An unsigned note had arrived at his Bucharest hotel the night before. The theatre of death opens here. Directed, or the wrong actor claims the applause. He stepped from the chill autumn air into the palace's embrace, smoothing an imaginary wrinkle from the sleeve of his perfect black suit. He paused in the Moorish salon doorway. The body had been removed, but the stage remained dressed. Mother-of-pearl inlay shimmered on low tables. Persian carpets lay undisturbed. The fountain still murmured. A single glass sat on the rim, exactly where it had been found. Observe, mon ami, this is no haphazard exit. The glass is placed too neatly. The body reclines with theatrical grace. Even death has been directed. Poirot's green eyes moved across the assembled cast. First, the widow. Princess Eleanor Mavrocordat stood near the fireplace in black silk. She dabbed at dry eyes with a lace handkerchief. Chanel No. 5 drifted from her like expensive incense. Her performance of grief was technically flawless. Shoulders trembled on cue, voice broke at precisely the right moments. Yet the handkerchief stayed pristine. No mascara streaked, no tears glistened. Next, the brother, Count Victor Mavrocordat, paced in rough tweed, the scent of sandalwood cologne mingling with wood smoke that clung to his coat from the terrace. He played the furious protector, fists clenched, voice rising. "Alexandru trusted vipers," he declared, but his eyes remained cool, calculating, then the business partner. Nicolae Petrescu, broad-shouldered in crisp linen, smelled of strong coffee and expensive cigars. He offered quiet sympathy and practical help, papers already prepared, alibis neatly typed. His role, the loyal friend. Yet his smile arrived a fraction too quickly. The young secretary followed. Miss Irina Popescu wore a simple gown beneath which rough tweed peeked. Soft kid gloves twisted in her lap. She played trembling innocence, wide eyes, soft voice. "I only wish to serve him," she murmured. But she never once looked toward the spot where the body had lain. Last came the enigmatic guest. Baroness Lydia von Hohenberg, Austrian exile, moved in velvet and pearls. Her perfume was exotic, heavy with spice. She performed cool detachment, sipping icy champagne as though tragedy were merely another scene in an indifferent play. Poirot tilted his egg-shaped head. The air held leather, lilies, and the faint trace of bitter almond that lingered near the fountain. Footsteps echoed softly as a maid passed. The chandelier crystals tinkled overhead like tiny applause. "You watch with Poirot, non? See how each actor has taken their mark. The princess grieves without weeping. The brother rages without heat. Petrescu helps without warmth. The secretary trembles without cause. The baroness watches without concern." The police inspector approached, hat in hand. "Monsieur Poirot, the matter is clear, suicide. The note was found, his own handwriting." Poirot touched his magnificent moustache thoughtfully. "Mais non, Inspector, this is theatre, and Hercule Poirot directs only one kind of performance, the truth." The guests turned toward him. Rain drummed harder against the glass. The fire crackled. A champagne flute somewhere in the drawing-room gave a single lonely ring as it was set down. The stage was set. The actors had taken their places. Let the drama begin. Chapter 2. Enter the players. Hercule Poirot transformed the palace library into his private rehearsal room. Leather-bound volumes lined the walls in perfect order. The fire crackled steadily, sending wood smoke curling toward the high ceiling. A single desk lamp cast a warm pool of light over the polished mahogany surface. Outside, rain continued its soft tattoo against leaded windows. He summoned the players one by one. Each entrance became a scene under his unflinching spotlight. Princess Elena Mavrocordat entered first. Black silk whispered across the parquet. She settled into the velvet armchair opposite Poirot, crossing ankles with practiced grace. Chanel No. 5 arrived before she did. "My husband was broken by debt," she began, voice low and measured. "The investments failed. He spoke often of ending the performance." Her lace handkerchief appeared. She pressed it briefly to dry eyes. Poirot regarded her. The performance of widowhood was meticulous. Slight tremble of lip, downward gaze, fingers twisting the handkerchief just so. Yet no tear fell. The lace remained spotless. No mascara traced faint black lines on pale cheeks. "You discovered the body, madame?" he asked gently. "No, I was in my suite, reading." A pause. "I heard nothing until the servant screamed. Watch this performance carefully, mon ami. A grief rehearsed to perfection leaves no room for error, and therefore no room for truth. Count Victor followed. Tweed jacket still carried the scent of terrace wood smoke and damp night air. He stood rather than sat, fists opening and closing. Alexandru trusted the wrong people, he declared. Petrescu pushed him into those cursed Balkan railway shares. When they collapsed, his voice rose, then steadied. My brother could not face ruin. Poirot tilted his head. You argued with him that evening, no? Raised voices behind the study door. Victor stiffened. A discussion. Brothers differ. I left him at 10:15. Smoked a cigar on the terrace until 11. Alone, the careful observer, and you are becoming careful, nah, will note the hands. Warm, steady. No trace of chill lingers on skin that supposedly stood 30 minutes in October wind. Nicolae Petrescu entered briskly, bringing the aroma of strong coffee and faint Cuban tobacco. Crisp linen cuffs gleamed under the lamp. I tried to save him, he said at once, placing a slim folder on the desk. Here are the accounts, the final meeting notes. My alibi is documented. I was in the billiard room with 2 guests until midnight. Poirot opened the folder. Pages rustled like crisp currency. You quarrelled loudly at dinner, Poirot observed. Words about trust and betrayal. Business passion, monsieur. Nothing personal. Petrescu's smile flashed. Too prompt, too even. But consider the psychology. A man truly helpful does not smile while speaking of a friend's suicide. The mouth performs while the eyes calculate escape routes. And Miss Irina Popescu came next, small and hesitant. Rough tweed showed beneath the simple gown. Kid gloves twisted in her lap like living things. I was his secretary for 3 years, she whispered. I typed his letters, managed correspondence. That night I finished dictation at 9:30, then retired. Poirot leaned forward slightly. Yet a footman saw you in the corridor near the Moorish salon at 10 minutes to 11. Her face drained of colour. I forgot my notebook. I returned for it. I heard nothing, I swear. The mask of timid innocence fits snugly, yet trembles at the edges. Why does this girl avoid the simplest question with such elaborate fear? Baroness Lydia von Hohenberg swept in last. Velvet gown absorbed light. Exotic perfume rolled across the desk like spiced smoke, and she accepted a glass of sweet liqueur from the side table and sipped slowly. I knew the prince only slightly, she said, an acquaintance from Vienna salons. I retired early, headache, slept through the entire unfortunate event. Her eyes, cool and violet, met Poirot's without flinching. Yet the fingers holding the glass showed the faintest tremor. The liqueur surface rippled once, twice. The mask slips. Did you catch it? Confidence performed with such force that small betrayals become visible. Poirot arranged 3 pens in perfect alignment on the blotter. Contradictions had already surfaced like missed cues in a poorly rehearsed play. The princess claimed solitude in her suite. A maid heard silk slippers on the landing at 10:40. Victor swore he paced the terrace alone. Another guest noticed his silhouette near the salon windows, as Petrescu's typed alibis matched the clock to the minute, too precise for memory. Irina's forgotten notebook had never been mentioned before. The Baroness's headache had not prevented her laughing in the drawing room at 10 o'clock. Each actor had delivered their opening monologue. Each had staked a claim to innocence. Poirot rose, small hands making an expressive gesture. Every player has taken their mark. Some lines ring true. Others require rehearsal. He moved to the window, gazing at rain-streaked glass. The grandfather clock in the hall chimed the quarter hour, soft, inexorable. The players had entered the stage. But who performed truth, and who performed lies? Chapter 3. The First Act. The afternoon light slanted through tall library windows, turning dust motes into tiny performers on the polished mahogany table, and Poirot had requested the entire cast assemble in the drawing-room later. For now, he moved alone through the palace corridors. Small hands clasped behind his back, green eyes sharp. He paused first at the Moorish salon doorway. The fountain still trickled, a soft counterpoint to the grandfather clock's steady chime in the hall. The bitter almond scent had faded, replaced by fresh lilies a maid had placed in a crystal vase. Poirot bent to examine the spot where the prince had fallen. No scuff marks on the Persian carpet, no sign the body had been moved after death. The performance of suicide was almost flawless. Yet one small detail troubled him. He straightened, touching his magnificent moustache thoughtfully. A single drop of liqueur had fallen beside the glass, staining the marble rim ever so slightly. The drop was round, undisturbed. A man dying in agony does not place his glass down with such care, then allow one perfect tear of liquid to escape without tremor. Poirot moved to the terrace doors. Cold night air had seeped in earlier. Now the terrace lay silent under pale sun. He stepped outside. Footprints in the thin film of damp earth showed Count Victor had indeed walked here, but only a short distance. The prince turned back toward the house far sooner than the Count had claimed. A mask had begun to crack. Inside again, Poirot summoned the Count to the small morning room. Victor entered, tweed jacket brushed, sandalwood cologne sharp against the scent of furniture wax. "You stated you smoked a cigar on the terrace until 11, Poirot began mildly. "Correct. Yet your footprints returned to the house at approximately 10:40. A cigar takes longer than 25 minutes, no?" Victor's jaw tightened. "I grew cold. I returned inside briefly, then went out again." Poirot tilted his egg-shaped head. The second set of prints does not appear. Only one journey out and back. The Count's hands clenched at his sides. For the first time, the performance of righteous anger faltered. The eyes flickered with something raw. Fear, perhaps, or calculation caught off guard. The mask slips. "Did you see it, mon ami?" The confident brother suddenly stumbles over his own lines. Poirot pressed gently. "You were near the Moorish salon windows at 10:40. A guest saw your silhouette." Victor exhaled sharply. "Very well. I looked in on Alexandru. He was alive drinking. I left him. That is all. Yet you did not mention this earlier. I did not wish to complicate matters." Poirot made an expressive gesture with small hands. "Truth never complicates, monsieur. Lies, however, they multiply like rabbits in a bad play." Victor said nothing more. The interview ended in silence, broken only by rain-tapping glass and distant crystal tinkling in the hall. Later, Poirot stood alone by the library fire. The warmth contrasted the chill still clinging to his memory of the terrace. He reflected on the nature of masks men wear, especially men of title and tradition in a world shifting beneath their feet. Humans don masks because naked truth is intolerable. The grieving widow masks relief at freedom from tyranny. The loyal brother masks resentment accumulated over years of living in another's shadow. The helpful partner masks greed that has outgrown friendship. Society applauds these performances. It rewards the actor who never drops character. Yet every mask is heavy. Guilt presses against the edges until, inevitably, a crack appears. One unguarded moment, one mismatched footprint, one dry handkerchief, and the entire edifice trembles. I am reminded of the case of Roger Ackroyd in that quiet English village so many years ago. A man murdered his wealthy patron and then performed shock and horror with such artistry that even the local police accepted his innocence at once. He wept publicly, clutched his head, spoke in broken sentences of grief. He had practiced before mirrors, widened his eyes to perfect dismay, rehearsed the catch in his throat. The performance was technically superb, but he made one fatal error. When the body was discovered, he reached for his pipe with hands too steady. A genuinely shocked man fumbles, his fingers tremble. The body betrays what the face conceals. In the end, the little grey cells perceived what others missed. The steadiness of those hands was the tell. The mask so carefully constructed crumbled because one small physical truth refused to play its part. So it is here. Count Victor's footprints refuse to support his script. Princess Elena's handkerchief refuses to weep. Each crack widens the fissure. The first act has shown us that no performance survives perfect scrutiny. Poirot arranged a row of pens on the desk in precise symmetry. The fire crackled. A maid passed in the corridor, silk apron rustling softly. The first act concluded. Some masks had cracked. More would follow. Chapter 4. Rehearsed Lines. Evening settled over Cotrocini Palace like a heavy velvet curtain. The drawing-room glowed under the crystal chandelier, its prisms tinkling softly with every draught. Hothouse roses in tall vases released their sweetness, mingling with the faint cigar smoke that clung to the gentlemen's jackets and the sharp bite of strong continental coffee served on silver trays. The fire roared in the marble hearth, throwing warm light across silk-upholstered sofas and crisp linen-covered tables. Hercule Poirot had requested the cast gather once more. This time not for gentle questioning, but for pressure. He stood near the grandfather clock, small and precise, smoothing an imaginary wrinkle from his sleeve. His green eyes moved from face to face like a director scanning for the actor about to forget their lines. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, voice calm yet carrying to every corner. "The little performance continues, but now we test the scripts." He turned first to Princess Elena. She sat very straight in black silk, hands folded in her lap. The lace handkerchief rested beside her like a prop no longer needed. "You maintain, madame, that you remained in your suite from 10 o'clock onward?" "Yes." Yet a maid heard footsteps, silk slippers, on the landing at 10:40, descending, then ascending again. Elena's chin lifted. "She is mistaken." Poirot made a small, expressive gesture. "The maid has worked in this house 15 years. She knows the sound of your step as she knows her own heartbeat." The princess's lips pressed into a thin line. For the first time, the perfect mask of composure showed strain. A tiny muscle twitched at the corner of her eye. "Bravo, madame, but the performance falters. Truth needs no rehearsal. Lies always do." Poirot moved to Count Victor. "Your footprints, monsieur. One journey out, one journey back. Yet you claim 30 minutes on the terrace." Victor's tweed shoulders stiffened. "I told you. I stepped inside briefly." "To do what?" "To warm my hands at the fire in the hall." Poirot tilted his egg-shaped head. "The hall fire had been banked low at 10 o'clock. No warmth lingered. Your hands, however, are still warm now." Victor opened his mouth, closed it. The rehearsed outrage cracked. What showed beneath was not anger, but something colder. Calculation caught in the act. "Observe, mon ami." And the brother who roared so convincingly at dinner now speaks in fragments. The script fails when pressed. Next, Nicolae Petrescu. He stood with arms folded, crisp linen gleaming, cologne of coffee and tobacco sharp in the warm air. Your alibis are impeccable, monsieur. Typed, timed, witnessed, almost too impeccable. Petrescu smiled tightly. I'm a methodical man. Indeed. Yet one witness, the billiard marker, remembers you leaving the room for 7 minutes at 10:50. You returned flushed. Impossible. You stepped out to telephone Bucharest. The exchange log shows a call placed from the Palace line at that exact time to your broker. Petrescu's smile vanished. Business, nothing more. Business after your partner's death has been announced. While the police still examine the body, Poirot's voice remained gentle. The helpful friend does not telephone stock prices at such a moment. Petrescu's fingers drummed once on his sleeve, once only, then stilled. The rhythm of confidence had broken. Miss Irina Popescu sat apart, kid gloves twisting in her lap like small frightened animals. She had grown paler since yesterday. You returned for a notebook, Poirot said softly, yet no notebook was missing from your desk. The prince's final letter, the one you typed at 9:30, contains a single line added in his own hand. Irina knows. Her breath caught audibly. He must have written it later. Or you returned not for paper, but to ensure something else, to watch, to wait. Tears welled, real this time. Yet she shook her head, lips trembling. I would never harm him. The timid secretary's mask frays at the seams. Her innocence performed too long becomes exhausting. Finally, Baroness Lydia von Hohenberg. She reclined in velvet, sipping sweet liqueur from crystal. Her violet eyes met Poirot's without blinking. Your headache, Baroness. It prevented you hearing the commotion, yet not from laughing in the drawing room at 10 o'clock. I recovered briefly, and then retired again, through the side corridor that passes the Moorish salon. Her fingers tightened on the stem of the glass. The liqueur surface shivered. The performance of detachment is admirable, Poirot said, but detachment does not cause the pulse to race at the neck when one is questioned about a mere corridor. Lydia set the glass down with deliberate care. You presume much, monsieur. No, I observe. The room fell silent save for the fire's crackle and rain against the windows. He rehearsed lines had begun to falter. Alibis, once delivered smoothly, now stumbled. Performances strained under repeated spotlight. Poirot arranged 3 crystal tumblers on the mantel in perfect alignment. Truth requires no script. It simply is. Lies, however, they must be remembered, repeated, polished. And polishing takes energy. Energy runs out. He turned to face them all. The stage grows smaller, mes amis. The exits narrow. Someone among you will soon forget their lines entirely. The chandelier tinkled overhead. A log settled in the grate with a soft pop. Cold air seeped from the terrace doors, brushing against warm faces. Rehearsed lines began to falter. The script was failing. Chapter 5. The mask slips night had fallen fully over Cotrocini Palace. The drawing-room lights burned low, casting long shadows across velvet curtains and polished mahogany. The grandfather clock chimed 10 with slow, deliberate strokes. Rain lashed the tall windows in sudden gusts, then fell quiet again. Inside, the air held the mingled scents of dying hothouse roses, lingering cigar smoke, and the faint metallic trace of strong coffee gone cold in porcelain cups. Hercule Poirot had summoned only one player this time. Princess Eleanor Mavrocordat entered alone. Black silk clung to her like a second skin. The lace handkerchief was absent tonight. She moved with the same regal poise, yet something had shifted. The shoulders no longer trembled on cue. She sat opposite Poirot on the silk-upholstered sofa, hands folded too tightly in her lap. "You have been most patient, madame," Poirot began. voice soft as the fire's dying crackle. "But patience has limits. The time has come to drop the curtain on this particular performance." Elena's violet eyes met his. "I do not understand you." "Mais oui, you understand perfectly. You understand the cyanide in the sweet liqueur. You understand the glass placed so neatly beside the hand. You understand why no struggle marred the scene." A long silence stretched. The chandelier prisms tinkled once as a draught slipped through. "I loved my husband," she said at last. The words came too smoothly. Poirot leaned forward slightly. "Love, madame, does not require rehearsal. You have rehearsed this line many times, before mirrors perhaps, or in the quiet hours after the servants slept." Her lips parted, then closed. Poirot continued, gentle yet relentless. The handkerchief dry as autumn leaves, the mascara that never ran, the shoulders that shook with precision. All technically perfect, too perfect. A woman truly grieving weeps until her face is ruined. She does not preserve her beauty in the moment of loss. Elena's hands unclenched. One finger traced the seam of the sofa cushion, slow, unconscious. "The maid heard your slippers on the landing at 10:40, Poirot said, "descending, then ascending. You did not go to read in your suite. You went to the Moorish salon. No. You carried the glass yourself. You poured the liqueur. You waited until he drank. You watched the convulsions begin, quiet, controlled convulsions, and then you arranged the body with care. The performance of suicide." Her breathing quickened. The silk of her gown rose and fell too rapidly. "You see, madame, the body betrays. A man poisoned by cyanide arches in agony, his hands claw, yet your husband's fingers remained curled gently around the stem. Someone steadied them after death. Someone who knew exactly how a suicide should appear." Elena's gaze dropped to the carpet. "You cannot prove—" "I do not need to prove with papers and fingerprints," Poirot said. "I prove with the psychology. You played grief because you felt relief. The controlling husband, the endless debts he created, the public role of perfect wife, all burdens lifted in one bitter swallow. But relief must wear a mask. So you chose grief, the most convincing costume." A log settled in the grate with a soft pop. Sparks rose, died. Elena's shoulders began to shake. Not the rehearsed tremor of before, but something raw, uneven. A sound escaped her throat, half sob, half laugh. "I hated him," she whispered. The words came out cracked, unguarded. He humiliated me, paraded his secretaries, spent fortunes I could never reclaim. Every night I smiled for Bucharest, while he laughed behind closed doors. When he spoke of ending it all, I saw my chance." Tears came now, real, messy, streaking mascara, in black rivulets down pale cheeks. The handkerchief lay forgotten. She made no move to wipe her face. I poured the cyanide into his glass while he turned to look at the fountain. He drank. He smiled at me. One last condescending smile. Then the convulsions. I held his hands so they would not thrash. I wanted it clean, dignified, like the prince he pretended to be. She lifted her head. The mask had fallen completely. Beneath it was exhaustion, rage, and a terrible hollow freedom. Poirot regarded her quietly. "The performance ends, madame. You played the grieving widow with such artistry that even I, Hercule Poirot, was almost deceived for a moment. But the body cannot lie forever. The dry eyes, the steady hands, the too perfect arrangement of death. These are the tells of one who feels not sorrow, but deliverance." Helena's voice broke entirely. "What happens now?" "Now justice takes the stage," Poirot said. "But first, truth has taken its bow." He rose, small and dignified. The firelight caught the gleam in his green eyes. "You watch with Poirot, no? See how the mask falls at last." Beneath the perfect grief was relief wearing its own costume. Beneath relief, hatred. Beneath hatred, freedom she could not confess until the spotlight burned too bright. The room felt colder despite the fire. Rain drummed steadily. Somewhere distant, a door closed softly. The mask had fallen, and the true face emerged. Chapter 6. Behind the curtain. Dawn crept through the tall windows of Cotrocini Palace, pale and uncertain. The drawing-room lay quiet now. The fire had burned to embers, leaving only faint wood smoke curling upward. Crystal glasses from the previous night stood abandoned on silver trays, their rims catching the first cold light. The scent of dying hothouse roses mingled with the leather of armchairs and the lingering trace of sweet liqueur. Hercule Poirot had not slept. He sat alone in the library, small hands folded, green eyes fixed on a single letter he had retrieved from the Moorish salon fireplace hours earlier. Half-burned, yet legible enough. The princess's confession had opened the curtain. Now he examined what lay behind it. He unfolded the charred page carefully. It was a draft of the prince's will, dated 2 weeks prior. The bulk of the Mavrocordat fortune, estates, investments, the Bucharest townhouse, went not to Elena, but to a trust for future heirs. A codicil added in hasty script named Irina Popescu as beneficiary of a modest annuity for faithful service. The original will, Poirot knew from the family solicitor summoned at midnight, had been revoked only days before the death. The prince had intended to disinherit his wife entirely. Behind the curtain of marriage lay resentment, sharpened to a blade. Poirot rose and moved to the corridor. He paused outside the secretary's small room. The door stood ajar. Inside, Irina sat at her desk in the half-light, kid gloves discarded, rough tweed coat draped over the chair back. She had been crying, quietly, steadily. A small packet of letters lay open before her. "Miss Popescu," Poirot said softly from the threshold. She started, then sagged. "I knew you would come." He entered, closing the door with a gentle click. The room smelled faintly of ink and her simple cologne, lavender, unpretentious. "You were more than secretary," he observed. Irina's fingers brushed the letters. 3 years. He promised things, a future. When the debts grew unbearable, he said he would leave her. "Marry me quietly in Vienna." I believed him. She lifted one envelope. Inside, the prince's bold hand. "My dearest Irina, soon we shall be free of pretense. The new will is prepared. She will have nothing." Poirot tilted his head. "Yet the final will you typed named you only for a small sum." Irina laughed, a short, bitter sound. "He changed his mind the night before he died. Told me over dictation. Elena suspects. Better to wait." I typed the revocation myself. Then he drank his liqueur and never woke. The mask of timid innocence had already cracked. Now it lay in pieces. Beneath it, a woman betrayed twice, first by love, then by death. "You return to the salon not for a notebook," Poirot said. "No." Her voice was steady now. "I went to beg him one last time, to remind him of promises. I found him already convulsing. I could have called for help. I didn't. I watched until it was over. Then I left." A long silence followed. Rain tapped the window like distant applause dying away. "You did not kill him," Poirot said, "but you allowed death to finish its performance." Irina nodded once. "I hated him then, for the lies, for making me believe I was more than a convenience." Poirot regarded her quietly, Humans hide motives behind the most unexpected curtains. Love performs as devotion until it curdles into obsession. Obsession performs as patience until patience snaps. The secretary had worn the mask of loyalty so long that when it fell, what emerged was not villainy, but exhausted disillusion. Humans wear masks because the naked self is too fragile for the role society demands. The wife masks hatred as grief to preserve dignity. The lover masks betrayal as quiet acceptance to preserve hope. We perform to survive the gaze of others, yet every hidden connection pulls at the threads until the whole fabric unravels. Behind every curtain, a secret waits. Behind every secret, a motive sharp enough to draw blood. I recall the case of the veiled lady on the Orient Express, where a woman performed devoted widowhood after her husband's murder, only for it to emerge that she had orchestrated the death to free herself from a marriage of convenience. She wept in public, clutched rosaries, spoke softly of eternal love. Yet, in private moments, observed by chance, she smiled at her reflection, a small, satisfied curve of the lips. The body cannot sustain contradiction forever. Genuine sorrow weighs down the shoulders. Feigned sorrow lifts them imperceptibly. In the end, one unguarded glance in a mirror betrayed what years of performance could not conceal. The little grey cells noted the lift, the lightness, and the mask disintegrated. So here, the princess masked relief as grief. The secretary masked heartbreak as loyalty. The brother masked envy as outrage. Each believed their curtain secure. Yet every secret connection, debts, promises, betrayals, pulled until the stage itself trembled. Poirot folded the half-burned letter and placed it in his pocket. "Behind every curtain, a secret," he murmured. "Behind every secret, a motive." Outside, the rain eased. A faint ray of morning sun touched the Persian carpet in the hall. Somewhere distant, a door opened and closed, softly, as though the palace itself exhaled. Behind every curtain, a secret, every secret, a motive. Chapter 7. The Final Act. The drawing-room of Cotrocini Palace had become the grandest stage Bucharest had ever seen. Every chandelier blazed, crystal prisms threw rainbows across velvet curtains and polished mahogany. The grandfather clock stood silent for once, its hands frozen at 11. The fire roared high, sending wood smoke curling toward the ceiling. Hothouse lilies in tall vases released their heavy sweetness, faint traces of Cuban cigar smoke, and Chanel No. 5 lingered like ghosts of earlier performances. All the players were assembled. Princess Elena sat rigid in black silk, mascara still faintly streaked from the previous night's collapse. Count Victor stood near the terrace doors, tweed jacket unbuttoned, hands thrust deep in pockets. Nicolae Petrescu occupied a leather armchair, crisp linen cuffs gleaming, face composed but eyes watchful. Miss Irina Popescu perched on the edge of a sofa, kid gloves abandoned beside her, rough tweed coat folded neatly in her lap. Baroness Lydia von Hohenberg reclined in velvet, sipping icy champagne with deliberate calm. Yet the glass trembled once, betraying her. Hercule Poirot stood at the centre of the room, small, precise, immaculate. He adjusted his magnificent moustache with one small hand, then spread both arms in an expressive gesture, as though raising a conductor's baton. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, voice carrying with quiet authority, "you have each performed for Hercule Poirot. Some truthfully, some not. The curtain has risen on every act. Now we come to the finale. Let us review the performances, shall we?" He turned first to the princess. "Princess Elena, you played the grieving widow with exquisite artistry. the dry handkerchief, the mascara preserved, the shoulders trembling on perfect cue. Magnifique, but grief does not rehearse. You knew of the death before the footman screamed, because you caused it. You poured the cyanide into his sweet liqueur while he admired the fountain. You steadied his hands in death so the scene would appear self-inflicted. Your motive? Relief. Freedom from a husband who humiliated and impoverished you. The mask of sorrow concealed deliverance. Elena's head bowed. No denial came. Only silence. Poirot moved to Count Victor. Count Victor, you performed the outraged brother, fists clenched, voice thundering against betrayal. Yet your footprints betrayed you. Short journeys, not the long vigil you claimed. You looked through the salon window at 10:40, saw your brother drink, saw him convulse. You did not enter. You did not call for help. Why? Because you too felt relief. The debts he created would no longer drag the family name down. Inheritance would flow to you. You performed loyalty to mask envy accumulated over years. Victor's shoulders sagged. He stared at the carpet. Next, Nicolae Petrescu. You, monsieur, played the loyal friend and practical partner. Documents prepared, alibis typed to the minute, sympathy offered with prompt smiles. But helpful friends do not telephone brokers at the moment of a partner's death. You knew the cyanide would act swiftly. You had already positioned yourself to salvage what remained of the investments. Greed performed as concern. Petrescu's fingers drummed once on the armrest, then stilled. Poirot turned to Irina. Miss Popescu, the timid secretary. Wide eyes, trembling hands, the role of innocence perfected. Yet you returned to the salon, not for a notebook, but to watch the end of a man who had promised you marriage, and then discarded you for caution, but you allowed death to finish its work. Heartbreak performed as loyalty until it could perform no longer. Irina wept quietly, real tears now, no performance left. Finally, the Baroness. Baroness Lydia, you gave the most subtle performance, cool detachment, the disinterested observer. Yet detachment does not cause the pulse to race at the neck, nor the champagne to tremble in the glass. You were here as the prince's secret creditor. Vienna loans he could never repay. His death cancelled those debts. Indifference masked calculation. Lydia set her glass down with a soft clink. Touché, monsieur. Poirot drew himself up to his full, still modest, height. And so we come to the leading performer. Princess Eleanor Mavrocordat, you gave the most convincing performance of all. The shock when the body was discovered. The outrage at the suggestion of murder. The helpful cooperation with the police. Magnifique! But you made one small error. One moment when the mask slipped irreparably. He stepped closer. When I first questioned you, you dabbed at dry eyes. Perfect grief. But later, when the truth pressed too hard, you wept, truly wept. Mascara ran. Shoulders shook without rhythm. The body, madame, cannot sustain contradiction forever. Genuine emotion arrives unbidden and ruins the face. Your first grief was costume. Your final tears were the real feeling breaking through. That is when I knew. The woman who arranged such a tidy death could never have felt genuine sorrow at the moment it happened. Relief wore the mask of grief until relief no longer needed the disguise. Elena looked up. Her voice was very small. I wanted it clean, dignified. He deserved that much. Poirot inclined his head. The performance is over. The curtain falls. The truth, she takes her bow. Silence filled the room. The fire crackled once. Rain tapped the windows like fading applause. The chandelier prisms shivered in the draught. Poirot made one final expressive gesture with small hands. The final act concluded. Only truth survived the curtain call. Chapter 8. Curtain call. The drawing-room lamps had been dimmed to a soft amber glow. The fire burned low, casting long shadows that danced across velvet curtains and the polished mahogany floor. The grandfather clock resumed its measured ticking, as though the palace itself had exhaled after the final revelation. Hothouse lilies drooped in their vases, petals falling silently onto crisp linen tablecloths. The air carried the faint, lingering sweetness of dying roses, mixed with the cold leather of armchair and the last wisps of Cuban cigar smoke. No one had moved far. Princess Eleanor remained seated, head bowed, black silk gown pooling around her like spilled ink. Mascara tracks had dried on her cheeks. The perfect mask of composure was gone forever. Count Victor leaned against the marble mantel, tweed jacket rumpled, staring into the embers without seeing them. Nicolae Petrescu sat forward in his leather chair. Elbows on knees, crisp linen cuffs now creased. Miss Irina Popescu had drawn her rough tweed coat around her shoulders, kid gloves forgotten on the sofa beside her. Baroness Lydia von Hohenberg stood near the terrace doors, velvet gown catching faint moonlight. Her champagne glass stood empty on the windowsill. Hercule Poirot moved quietly among them, edged small hands clasped behind his back. He paused beside each in turn, offering no further accusation, only the gentle weight of truth already spoken. The police inspector entered through the double doors, hat in hand, accompanied by 2 uniformed officers. Their boots sounded soft on the parquet, respectful of the room's sudden stillness. Rain had ceased outside. Only the distant drip from eaves broke the quiet. "Princess Eleanor Mavrocordat," the inspector said formally, voice low, "I must ask you to accompany us. The charge is murder." Elena rose without protest. Her movements were slow, almost graceful in their defeat. She looked once at Poirot, violet eyes empty of artifice now, and inclined her head in the smallest acknowledgement. "Thank you, monsieur," she murmured, "for ending the performance." Poirot inclined his head in return. "The curtain must fall, madame. Justice is the only encore permitted." The officers stepped forward. One produced handcuffs. Elena extended her wrists without resistance. The metal clicked softly, cold against warm skin. She did not flinch. Count Victor straightened. "Elena, I should have seen it sooner." She glanced at him. "You saw what you wished to see, Victor. We all did." Nicolae Petrescu rose abruptly. "I will arrange counsel. The best in Bucharest. This need not—" Poirot raised a small hand. "Monsieur, your concern arrives too late. The broker's call at 10:50 has already been noted. The police will wish to speak with you regarding conspiracy after the fact." Petrescu sank back into the chair. His face, once so composed, showed lines of strain that no rehearsal could hide. Irina stood next. Tears had ceased, and her face was pale, but calm. "I will tell them everything," she said quietly. "The letters, the promises, what I allowed to happen." Poirot regarded her gently. "Truth, mademoiselle, is the only role left to play now. It requires no mask." Baroness Lydia turned from the window. "And I, Monsieur Poirot." "Your debts are cancelled by death," he replied, "but your presence here on the night in question will interest the authorities. Vienna may yet have questions." She gave a small, wry smile. "Then the performance continues in another theatre." The inspector cleared his throat. "If there are no further objections—" There were none. Elena was led toward the doors first. Her silk gown rustled faintly. One last whisper of elegance. Victor stepped forward as though to speak, then stopped. Irina watched her go without hatred, only a quiet sadness. Petrescu stared at his hands. Lydia lifted her chin, violet eyes dry. As the group passed into the corridor, footsteps echoed softly down the grand staircase. A door closed somewhere below, final, unhurried. The palace seemed to settle, relieved of its burden. Poirot remained in the drawing room. He moved to the mantel and straightened a single crystal vase that had tilted slightly. The lilies nodded as though in thanks. He touched his magnificent moustache thoughtfully, then smoothed an imaginary wrinkle from his sleeve. The others drifted away one by one. Victor toward the library, shoulders bowed. Petrescu to the telephone in the hall, already composing explanations. Irina to her small room, to gather the letters that would now serve as evidence rather than secrets. Lydia to the guest wing, velvet gown trailing like a last act's train. Silence returned, broken only by the grandfather clock's steady pulse and the faint crackle of dying embers. Poirot stood alone beneath the chandelier. Its prisms caught the low light and threw tiny stars across the carpet. He looked at the empty sofa where Eleanor had sat, at the terrace doors where Victor had stood, at the armchair where Petrescu had calculated. No applause followed this performance, no curtain calls with bouquets, only the quiet arrival of justice, cold, methodical, inevitable. He made one small expressive gesture with his hands, as though lowering an invisible curtain. The stage was empty now. The actors had exited. The lights would dim soon. No applause for this performance. Only justice. Chapter 9. After the show morning sunlight poured through the tall windows of Cotrocini Palace, is turning dust motes into fleeting performers on the polished parquet. The drawing-room stood empty now, stripped of its earlier drama. Velvet curtains had been drawn back to let in the pale autumn light. The fire was cold ash in the marble hearth. Hothouse roses, once proud, lay wilted on silver trays beside forgotten crystal glasses. The air held only the faint memory of Worth perfume and Cuban cigar smoke, overlaid by the clean scent of furniture wax, as maids moved quietly through their tasks. The palace had begun its slow return to ordinary life. Servants polished mahogany panels with soft cloths. Footsteps echoed lightly along corridors that only yesterday had carried the weight of accusation. The grandfather clock chimed the hour with steady, untroubled notes, no longer marking suspense, only time. Hercule Poirot walked the grounds alone before departing. The terrace, once a stage for Victor's rehearsed outrage, lay peaceful under crisp blue sky. Rain-washed gravel crunched beneath his polished shoes. He paused at the low stone balustrade, looking out over the gardens where late roses still clung to their stems. A chill breeze stirred the leaves. He drew his overcoat closer. Inside, transformations had already begun. Princess Eleanor had been taken to Bucharest's central prison the previous evening. She walked from the palace without resistance, black silk replaced by a plain wool coat provided by the police. No tears fell now. Her face was calm, almost relieved. The mask of grief had been discarded entirely. In its place, a woman who, for the first time in years, breathed without the pressure of performance. She would face trial, or almost certainly conviction. Yet, in the quiet of her cell, she would no longer need to rehearse sorrow or smile for society. Justice, though severe, had freed her from the heavier sentence of pretense. Count Victor remained at the palace, though he had already begun packing. The inheritance would come to him now, debts cleared by death, estates restored to order. He moved through the rooms like a man waking from a long dream. The tweed jacket hung loosely on his frame. Sandalwood cologne no longer masked the faint scent of wood smoke from nights spent pacing. He had spoken briefly to Poirot before dawn. I envied him, Victor admitted, staring at the Moorish salon doorway. Always the favoured son, always the centre. I told myself I stayed to protect the name. In truth, I waited for the moment it would fall to me. He shook his head. I will sell what I can. Leave Bucharest, perhaps Vienna, a smaller life, no more roles to play. Nicolae Petrescu had departed at first light in his black motor car. The crisp linen suit was gone. He wore a plain overcoat and carried only a single briefcase. His broker's call had been traced. Questions about insider dealings would follow. Yet he drove away with shoulders squared, not broken, but altered. The mask of the helpful partner had cracked beyond repair. In its place, a man forced to confront the cost of calculation. He would fight the charges, no doubt. But the easy confidence was finished. Ambition would wear a humbler face from now on. Miss Irina Popescu had chosen to stay one final day. She sat in the small secretary's room, sorting papers with methodical care. The rough tweed coat lay folded on the chair. Our kid gloves rested beside a small valise. The letters from the prince, once hidden treasures, now sat in an envelope addressed to the police. She had written her own statement. Every promise, every betrayal, every moment she had watched death finish its work without calling out. "I will not run," she told Poirot when he looked in. "I allowed it to happen. That makes me part of the performance. I will answer for my silence." Her eyes, once wide with performed innocence, were steady now. Heartbreak had burned away illusion. What remained was quiet resolve. She would testify truthfully. After the trial, she planned to leave Romania, perhaps to Paris, where she could type for someone who valued words without demanding devotion. Baroness Lydia von Hohenberg had already vanished by mid-morning. Her velvet gown and pearls were gone from the guest suite. Only a faint trace of exotic perfume lingered on the air. A note left on the hall table read simply, "Debts settled, curtain closed." She would return to Vienna, where old creditors no longer pressed, and new salons awaited. The role of disinterested observer had served her well. She would play it again elsewhere, perhaps with greater caution. Poirot stood in the empty drawing-room one last time. He straightened a single crystal vase on the mantel, aligning it precisely with the clock. The chandelier prisms caught the sunlight and threw soft patterns across the carpet. No longer stars of tension, only gentle decoration. The theatre had emptied. Actors had shed their costumes. The grieving widow become the confessed killer. The outraged brother, a man seeking simplicity. The loyal partner, a figure facing reckoning. The timid secretary, a witness ready to speak. The cool observer, already gone to new stages. Yet lessons lingered in the quiet rooms. Masks worn too long leave marks on the face beneath. Relief can masquerade as grief, envy as loyalty, heartbreak as duty, until truth forces the curtain down. Those who survive the fall do not emerge unchanged. Some find freedom in confession. Others discover humility in consequence. All learn that no performance lasts forever. Poirot touched his magnificent moustache thoughtfully. He glanced once more at the Moorish salon doorway. Silent now, fountain stilled for cleaning. The palace breathed easier without its burden of secrets. He turned toward the grand staircase, small valise in hand. The theatre emptied. The lessons remained. To Chapter 10. Poirot reviews the performance. Hercule Poirot sat in the corner compartment of the Simplon Orient Express, bound for Paris. The train glided smoothly through the late afternoon countryside, wheels clicking in steady rhythm against the rails. Outside the window, golden fields slipped past under a sky the color of old ivory. Inside, the compartment was warm and ordered. A small table set with a porcelain cup of tisane, steam rising in delicate spirals. A single crystal glass of iced water beside it. His valise placed precisely on the luggage rack above. He had removed his overcoat and arranged his travelling suit with care. The magnificent moustache had been smoothed once, twice. Now he sat back against the velvet upholstery, small hands resting lightly on the armrests, green eyes half closed in reflection. The newspaper on his lap carried a brief notice from Bucharest. Princess Elena Mavrocordat, charged in husband's death, poison suspected. Below it, smaller type mentioned the ongoing inquiries into certain financial dealings of industrialist Nicolae Petrescu. No mention of Irina Popescu's quiet testimony, nor Victor's decision to sell the Cotrocini estate. Baroness Lydia von Hohenberg had already reappeared in Vienna salons, as though the weekend had been merely another interlude. Poirot lifted the tisane to his lips. The herbal warmth spread slowly. He set the cup down with a soft clink and spoke aloud, though no one else occupied the compartment. Another theatre closed, mon ami. Another curtain fallen, yet the little grey cells, they continue to turn. He considered the players one by one, but as though reviewing a programme after the final bow. Why do people perform rather than reveal truth? Because truth is dangerous. Truth strips away the roles society hands us at birth: the dutiful wife, the protective brother, the loyal friend, the modest secretary, the detached observer. Each role comes with a costume: grief, outrage, sympathy, innocence, indifference. And we wear it because nakedness invites judgment, rejection, ruin. Elena performed grief to conceal relief because society would never forgive a woman for welcoming freedom through poison. Victor performed loyalty to mask envy because a brother who waits for inheritance must never admit he wished for it. Petrescu performed helpfulness to hide greed because ambition must always appear accidental. Irina performed devotion to bury heartbreak because a discarded lover who watches death unfold without protest cannot bear to be seen as vengeful. Lydia performed detachment because a creditor who profits from murder must never seem invested. Masks are demanded by the audience, by family, by class, by tradition, by the glittering facade of 1930s Bucharest society. Remove the mask too soon, and the audience hisses. Keep it too long, and the face beneath forgets its own shape. Guilt always betrays the actor. It creeps into the smallest gestures: the dry handkerchief that should be sodden, the footprints that refuse to match the spoken timeline, the telephone call placed at the precise moment propriety forbids it, the tremor in champagne that should be steady. The body knows what the mind rehearses to deny. It sweats when composure is claimed, her trembles when confidence is declared, weeps genuinely only when the performance has collapsed entirely. In the end, no actor sustains the lie forever. The little grey cells wait patiently for the moment the mask slips, and it always slips. I am reminded of the affair at Styles so many years ago now. A woman poisoned her husband with strychnine, and then played the devoted nurse with such conviction that even the family physician accepted her innocence at first. She smoothed his brow, adjusted pillows, spoke in hushed tones of love eternal. She had rehearsed every gesture: the gentle hand on fevered forehead, the catch in her voice when speaking of his suffering. Yet she made one error. She reached for the medicine bottle with fingers too calm, too precise. A genuinely grieving wife fumbles in distress, her hands shake, and the body remembers what the performance conceals. In that quiet English house, Surrounded by hedge-clipped lawns and polite conversation, the mask crumbled because one small, steady hand refused to play its part. Truth emerged not from grand evidence, but from the psychology beneath the surface, the discrepancy between performed emotion and physical reality. So, it was in Bucharest. Elena's dry eyes in the first act became genuine tears only when the curtain could no longer be held up. Victor's rehearsed rage gave way to quiet confession when footprints proved him liar. Petrescu's perfect alibis fractured under one misplaced telephone call. Irina's innocence dissolved into honest admission when the letters were read aloud. Lydia's detachment cracked with a single trembling glass, and the psychology of revelation is simple yet profound. Pressure reveals. The spotlight of sustained scrutiny burns away artifice. People confess not because they are caught in material evidence alone, but because the weight of maintaining the lie becomes heavier than the weight of truth. When every exit is blocked, when every line has been questioned, when the audience no longer applauds the performance, then the actor drops character. Truth triumphs because performance is exhausting. Truth simply is. Poirot finished the tisane and set the cup aside with precision. He looked out at the passing landscape, villages with tiled roofs, distant mountains touched by evening shadow. The train whistle sounded once, soft, mournful, final. Until the next theatre of crime, mes amis, he murmured to the empty compartment. Poirot will be watching. The Orient Express carried him onward into the gathering dusk. Somewhere ahead, another stage waited, another cast, another set of masks. But for now, the Bucharest curtain had fallen cleanly. Order and method had prevailed. The little grey cells rested, satisfied. The compartment light dimmed slightly as the steward passed in the corridor. A soft knock came at the door. Dinner would be served soon. Poirot rose, smoothed his jacket once more, and prepared to meet whatever small drama the dining car might offer. Until the next theatre of crime, mes amis, Poirot watches always.